Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for joining us for our Citizen Science webinar series. We are especially excited for today's session because it is Citizen Science Month in April, and we have been finding great ways to feature our programs, some of our incredible volunteer scientists, as well as some of our program leads that will be joining us today. We're going to be focusing on two specific programs and program leads today and their extraordinary work. First up will be Roy Arezzo. Roy is a 2024-2025 Teacher at Sea Alumni Association Fellow who has been collaborating with me and the rest of the Citizen Science team for the past almost 1 year. Roy has over 30 years of experience teaching in New York City schools. And in 2007, he participated in NOAA's Teacher at Sea program, sailing in the Bering Sea out of Alaska. For his current fellowship, Roy has been collaborating with several programs from across NOAA's different line offices for their citizen science programs to create meaningful education and outreach materials designed to connect citizen science with the classroom. Following up Roy, we're going to have Jeanette. Jeanette is a naturalist and environmental educator currently based at the Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History, where she runs the LiMPETS program. She does training for the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Region, and she has a background in social scientists and nearly a decade in place-based environmental education. She is going to be focusing on some of the different work that she's been able to do through the LiMPETS program, especially connecting with students within her community. And with that, we're going to kick it off with Roy.
All right. Well, thank you for the great introduction, Rebecca, and it's been a pleasure working with your team. Um, as I said, I'm excited to be here. Rebecca mentioned I am primarily a science teacher, um, and in 2007 sailed on the Oscar Dyson through the Teacher at Sea program, which I encourage people to check out, which is a great professional development opportunity. And for me, it was a transformative experience. Where I studied the eco-integration trawl survey of the walleye pollock with implications on fisheries and pollock populations on the Bering Sea, which helped me develop marine science and aquaculture curricula at the New York Harbor School where I was working at the time. Um, Throughout my career, I've engaged in place-based science and citizen science to give my students a real-world science hands-on experience. Some of these images uh, are images that correlate with some of the projects I've worked on, including oyster gardening and water quality work in New York's estuary through World Water Monitoring Day and the Hudson River, the Day in the Life of the Hudson and Harbor Citizen Science Project. And I can speak to uh, directly the outcomes that these experiences have had, both on my teaching and my students' interest in science and their experiences. The next slide is really not needed for anybody to read the whole slide. This slide is kind of preaching to the choir. Many of you uh, are already engaged, and you're an informed audience. But there are plenty of articles that list the benefits to the educational community of engaging in citizen science projects or community science. And by looking over some of these articles and looking at the data, it definitely generates environmental stewardship, connects students to local place-based environmental issues, but gives them a global perspective and helps with career exploration, in addition to STEM skills, STEAM skills when you bring in the arts, and often these projects, engagement in these projects and using these resources aligns with the next generation science standards. So, what I've done throughout my fellowship as a Teacher at Sea Alumni NOAA Fellow is partnered with Rebecca and her team to advance some of the citizen science projects that already exist. So I'm going to cover, there's no shortage of great projects out there. Um, but I would like to cover some of the projects I've highlighted that exemplify some best practices. So I'm starting out with the Marine Debris Program. I did not work on this project directly, but a former fellow of the Teacher at Sea program did. Um, and why I share this project is not only does this project get students out in the field, but it is very scalable. So there are resources on their website uh, to engage youth in beach cleanups. But for older students, if you want to submit data and be part of the citizen science efforts, there are protocols, training videos, and training resources to get students to follow the necessary um, procedure to get the data that the scientist needs to be inclusive. What's cool about this project, I find, is that a lot of these studies have led to some policy changes. And so students who are not necessarily submitting data can use these resources to not only learn about marine debris, which is a some marine debris cleanup cannot be tackled by a youth or a school or an informal education group, like removing large fishing gear or derelict vessels. But using the mapping tool on the website, not only can you engage in the project, but you can also learn about where these debris are located, what the makeup of these debris and the composition of them are, and how they can lead to change. So there are a lot of good anecdotal examples of aquaculture projects using less plastic as a result of this data. One project I heard about where there was an area with duck hunting, they switched over to biodegradable shell casings, and I'm sure there's many other beautiful outcomes from this type of work and learning opportunities. So this slide uh, really emphasizes sort of the benchmarks in a general way for participation and educational resources. First off, all of us want students in the field for many reasons. Through informal educators and formal educators, school groups, nature nonprofits, getting students engaged in this project has many benefits. We've already said that. But in order for your program to be successful, access has to be universal. So when possible, engaging an educator in designing the project or designing the resources is a great option. And if you have the budget to pay educators to be involved, that is an ideal situation. Get feedback on your resources. That's how this fellowship played out and enabled me to partner with certain project leads. Access is important, and access can be just obvious in intentional design. So many of you have, and many citizen science projects have, an online presence. So having these resources front and center is ideal. So letting the public know what grades are appropriate for the citizen science project or these resources, what grade levels, how does it align with standards. These are all things that can be intentionally posted and obvious, and if when possible, not burying these resources in the website, but having them front and center. I highlight the fishery which I will call Fish Stories so I don't stumble too much more. Uh, it's a great citizen science project. It's a regional project focused on the southern Atlantic, but it's they having met with the project lead, they are interested in having this project scale up, scale down, and be replicable in other regions. So they do provide some support in showing how their techniques are used to take historic photos to examine fisheries and collect data from these photos on species ID and species numbers that are caught through fisheries, through different fishing outfits. And they've recently explored how to use certain species to get measurements and how that connects to recruitment. And this can all lead to policy and catch limits and understanding our fisheries better. What I like about this project also is um, it definitely provides resources for educators that can learn about fisheries, um, and it is definitely replicable. Expectations. What do I mean by expectations? What are the expectations for data collection? What are the expectations for engagement? That should be clear and obvious. I noticed a lot of projects are good about that, but not many projects offer the background information to scaffold the science for their project. So this doesn't need to be something that involves your project creating lesson plans. You can link to NOAA resources through the Sea and Sky program. You can search resources that help teachers access learning resources that can scaffold up to the science of your project. So some projects are more complex and they probably require more background information than a lot of citizen science leads have time to provide. So linking to resources that already exist is smart. Uh, and then also, when possible, creating intentional lesson plans, posting them, if not lesson plans, worksheets. Um, in terms of data literacy, maps, data sets, and graphs. For format, it's important that citizen science projects make resources that are downloadable, that are printable, and when possible, if it can be edited instead of making a PDF, making a Word document that can be edited, it enables teachers to have some flexibility and how they use it in their classrooms. Another obvious adaptation for citizen science projects is online or phone apps. A lot of students and teachers use smartphones in the field. Here are just a few examples of these apps that are available. The Phytoplankton Monitoring Network, which I will talk about in a few minutes in more detail, uses their own app to identify species of algae. What's amazing about this is that teachers can download this app or students can download this app and do this activity without necessarily submitting data if they don't have time for that commitment. So it can be a learning tool, even though it's designed for the specific project. Nurdle Patrol is related to marine debris. It's an interesting project that's very simplified. They will send you not only obviously access to the app, but they will send you a little kit so that teachers and classes can do some of the data collection in the field. The protocols are very straightforward. And even if people do not have access to a suitable site, they do have maps that allow educators to check out where these debris, what is a nurdle and where you can find them, and some of the data all over the world. Whale Alert, like Happy Whale, where they ID whales, is a little more designed to avoid, to learn more about whale migration, avoid whale strikes with mariners. And even if teachers and students don't have access to whales and sites to study them or observe them, they can use the app to study migration routes and see real world data, where the whales are located, what species of whales are where, and it is a great resource. Just like MPing, and some of you are familiar with CocoRoss, some weather related apps that help you submit data to kind of verify um, forecasters forecasted weather data, so that um, they can collect real time data. And these maps, even if you're not submitting data, not only are they user friendly, but these map apps actually let you view what's happening in real time in terms of weather. So just a few examples. One of the projects I worked more intimately with is the Hudson River Eel Project. The Hudson River Eel Project focuses on Anguilla rostrata, the American eel found along the eastern seaboard, and is primarily focused in the Hudson Valley. Now, when they recruited me to work with them, and luckily I was able to get out in the field with them, it was very obvious that this project, which involves local New York State agencies, the DEC, and Cornell Cooperative Extension, that they were really plugged in to getting teachers, youth, students, informal education groups out in the field collecting data. And they had a host of different projects that they did, but most of the projects they worked on related to analyzing eel data in terms of populations for learning more about their local estuaries, and fisheries implications. What's interesting about the American eel, if you don't know a lot about it, is that it is a chondrotomous species. It's somewhat mysterious in that we don't know how they breed, and therefore it's really challenging to grow them in an aquaculture facility. So most eels that are marketed for consumption, especially with the expansion of sushi, um, they are live glass eels that are taken and grown out in facilities in the United States and elsewhere. This image that you see here is volunteers in the water collecting glass eels, and most of the data was focused on glass eels. But what's special about this project is they recognized that there are plenty of eels outside the Hudson Valley, and these resources should be replicable for other projects. And this project is now expanded, and there are projects like this in New Jersey and Massachusetts and other places. And the resources involving the data could be distributed to teachers, even if they weren't able to get access to a field site and get in the water. So I worked on the lesson plans. Chris Bowser and I, one of the project leads, ran a workshop at the National Science Teachers Association. And the whole focus of the workshop is, if you haven't seen an eel, you don't have time to see an eel, that's okay. Check out this mapping activity that teaches students a lot about geography, migration, and in the environment these eels live in. So we worked on a data literacy lesson in addition to the mapping activity, and these resources can be found at this QR code. And there are resources from K through 12 and beyond. So although they already had educational resources, were engaging teachers and students. They wanted to go to the next level and expand their resources so that they were more universal. And I think we did a good job of making that happen. The Phytoplankton Monitoring Network is another project I collaborated with. It's a national program, and what's special about it is that it focuses, although it focuses on marine harmful algal blooms, the resources they have for teachers and students to get involved um, can be used in freshwater across the nation. What's amazing is that they've been doing this for a long time with schools. I actually participated in this project for a couple of years when I first started at Harbor School. And they provided me with training, microscope, and resources to make it happen and submit data. It is a commitment, so they recognize that some of these educational resources would could benefit from being expanded to a wider audience, even if you're not participating. So they already had a website with where they collected resources for teachers that related to their project. And what they decided to do and enlist me in is expanding and updating their outreach brochure. So although the brochure is not available yet, it's still going through the permissions process. You see the top older version of the brochure in the top image is really geared towards if you're volunteering with them. And what we did was we took that section and we changed it into resources that are more applicable to anybody who gets a hold of this brochure. What are phytoplankton? What are harmful algal blooms, and how do they impact the environment? And how can you get your hands-on resources to help you teach this science? So the Phytoplankton Monitoring Network is in the process of putting out a new brochure, and also is talking about new lesson plans that are more specific to the work they're doing. Another project, and the last project I'm going to talk about today that I worked on, is Click a Coral. Click a Coral is a Zooniverse project where the it's specific to one region in the Gulf, and much of the work they've done is coral restoration work in the wake of the BP oil spill, Deep Horizon oil spill. Using that funding, they've used ROVs to collect data on damaged deep water coral in the mesophotic zone. As soon as I got engaged with this project, it was a little bit of a rabbit hole in that I realized immediately how complicated and complex and interesting the science of this project was, and how it needed to be scaffolded. A lot of people know about shallow water coral and coral reefs. They're and they're well documented, but less people know, especially students, about deep water coral. The citizen science aspect of this is basically to help, and it can be done by anybody in the country, but it's the project is designed for people to, using training protocols, students can ID coral to verify the AI system on how to identify different species and quantify the coral in their study zone. They have hours and hours of footage, so scientists on their team can't get through this on their own. They really need input and volunteerism. Their resources online are cool to use in the classroom. They have field guides. But what occurred to me pretty quickly is that through the work of the Mesophotic and Deep Benthic Communities Restoration Project, that there was much more to teach beyond just IDing coral. So understanding this unique ecosystem and the technology involved, and how we restore coral, I thought was a great uh, um, opening to teach more science, and that it could be taught in any science classroom. So they already had a bunch of resources that they have moved over to an intentional website that lists them. But um, what we did was we created worksheets for their recorded webinars. So when you have um, some type of recording or material for teachers to view, that this material is accessible to classrooms. So we created a guide for some of the recorded webinars. We created a lesson plan for their Dive Deeper program, which I encourage people to check out, download. It's a large file. You can't preview it and play it. It's really exciting and is very interactive. And we're working on other resources to scaffold up to these lesson plans with background information, and make sure that we have an engaged and knowledgeable audience that can then participate in the Click a Coral citizen science um, project. So in conclusion, um, there are many great projects out there, and I believe that many of these projects already have great science resources. The question is, can we incorporate more educational resources with background information, with a wider audience in mind, so that not only can we encourage participation, but use the resources to teach a wider scope of science in the classroom. And there's another great project that I looked into that's coming up, and I'm going to let them highlight their educational resources. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Roy, for your presentation. And so now we are going to turn things over to Jeanette.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jeanette Johnston, and I work at the Pacific Grove Museum of Natural History, where I run our field science programs, both water quality testing and our LiMPETS program, which I'm here to discuss today. And similar to Roy, a huge part of my passion and my role here is making science accessible to as many and as diverse an audience as possible, and especially to students. And the LiMPETS program really does an amazing job at that. So today, I'm going to look at, share with you all what the LiMPETS program is, the history, the regions that we work in, and the processes that have worked well for us, and then go into why it's students doing the monitoring, why we feel confident with students being the one to do this scientific research, and the impacts both to the marine ecosystems that we're working in and to the students. So first, the acronym, which is a little bit of a beast. The word limpets, which is, of course, a small little marine invertebrate, is in this case is standing for long-term monitoring program and experiential training for students. So long-term monitoring, we are operating at sites up and down the California coast, and most of these sites have been monitored, and we have data for over 20, 25 years, some of them 30, 35 years. And we want to give students experience running this kind of scientific protocol in the field. A little bit of background about the LiMPETS program. It was founded in 2002, but its history and its work really goes back to the 1970s. Dr. John Pierce, who's featured here, was a professor of biology at UC Santa Cruz and developed an inquiry-based, really student-centered approach to teaching marine science to his undergrad students. He brought them to rocky intertidal areas to collect data and to learn the process of science, and also to establish an ecological baseline in order to follow long-term changes in contrasting sites. And the monitoring data was collected over the next 25 years. And after Dr. Pierce retired, he obtained funding from California Sea Grant to develop a program to continue monitoring with high school students. And when this was completed in 2000, he entrusted that program to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, where it was housed for a while. At the same time, the Farallones National Marine Sanctuary was developing a similar monitoring program, but for sandy beaches for high school students to track long-term changes. And so working with Dr. Pierce and then Dr. Jennifer Saltzman at Stanford University, who's featured here on the far right, the two sanctuaries joined together with Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary to combine these shoreline programs into what's now LiMPETS. And we've expanded to middle school students as well. And so we've been operating now for over 25 years up and down the California coast, from the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary in the north to the Channel Islands down south. And it's really important for the students to get a sense of what a national marine sanctuary is and how they are contributing to the science behind it, and then to compare that to local MPAs. So here we've got an example of on the left, the map of the national marine sanctuaries, and then on the right, our various rocky intertidal monitoring spots. So up and down the coast of California. And the cool thing is that these sites, many of them were specifically chosen so that we have comparisons between locations that are within a marine protected area and those that are outside. So that gives us a really cool comparison for students to make. On the left, we've got MPAs within the Monterey Bay region. And then on the right, we've got our Sandy Beach monitoring spots. And it allows us to do some comparisons of what's happening within an MPA and outside it. So the process that LiMPETS follows is a little complex, and it's a real investment for teachers. And we're really grateful to those who are willing to make the investment. And it starts off with a teacher training, which is really critical to ensuring that their students get the kind of quality data that we collect, so that the quality of the data that we collect is pretty high. We do evaluations throughout the process to really, mostly for grant funding, to be honest, to understand what kind of impact we are having. The students then do at least 2.5 hours of in-class training. Again, we want to make sure that the quality of the data is high, so students get a lot of in-depth work before going out into the field, and I'll go through some of that process in a few minutes. And then they go out into the field. Sometimes it's just once in their lifetime. Sometimes a class who has the funding for it can visit multiple times, either the same site or different sites, and do some comparative work there. And then students enter the data into the database themselves. And ideally, if teachers are down for it, they create a research poster or community action project around that. So we're really going through the full life cycle of a scientific research project. And as I said, the in-class training is really critical. This is how we can say with confidence that the work students do in the field is of a strong caliber, and that the quality of the data can be relied on. This data has been used in academic papers and peer-published papers, and the reason that it can be counted on is because one, the protocols are pretty simple enough for 6th through 12th graders to reliably do, and the quality control that we put in place is pretty high as well. So students get some in-class lessons ahead of time, and we'll go through some of what they see here. So they learn the basics of the difference between a high and low tide, and zonation and various animal adaptations for surviving in these habitats. They learn and get to practice in class with the tools that they'll use out in the field and the protocols that we'll follow. And since we're talking like sixth graders through college, we need durable and cheap and easy to replicate tools. And any good scientist knows that something as simple as a Ziploc bag and a bucket can be the best tools. And we certainly find that the more durable, the better when we're talking about having 20 to 100 sixth graders out on the beach. We go through the monitoring methods and they practice that in the classroom as well. And one big emphasis in the trainings that I, in particular, have really advocated for in my time in the LiMPETS program is better connecting to the why. Why are these species important? Why do we care about long-term data about them? So sand crabs, Pacific mole crabs being an indicator species because of their abundance. We also, as we all know, are being hit by climate change in every aspects of our lives. There isn't anything out there, no people out there who aren't affected by climate change. And some of us, some of the students, especially that I teach, are impacted by it far more than others. So understanding the causes of climate change and the impacts both on the marine ecosystems that we're talking about and the human communities around it is really important. And then we really emphasize the data collection and what we use this data for. Not only am I submitting this data for our permits, and we have a number of research fellows who use this data for their senior thesis in college, for example, but we want students to be able to take the data that they're using and then see how it could be used in the real life. How might we use it to inform disturbance response and evaluation, for example, to protect our oceans and communities from the effects of climate change, pollution, coastal urbanization. And because we have over 20 years of data from some of these sites, we can observe what changes happen before and after an oil spill, for example, or a warm weather event to see how the environment responds or how long it will take to respond. And then finally, we get the students out into the field, which is obviously the most fun part of my job. We focus on two ecosystems, two types of programs that we deliver. The first is our rocky intertidal monitoring program, where students, high school and above, visit intertidal habitats and collect data on distribution and abundance of algae and invertebrates. The processes here are a little more complicated than the next one we'll cover, and that's why we leave this protocol at the Rocky Intertidal to only high schoolers, not middle schoolers. And as anybody who's had a middle schooler knows, they're still a little clumsy, not quite as trustworthy in a rocky intertidal habitat. So another factor there for the age limit is safety. The second program that we run is called Sandy Beach Monitoring, where students middle school and above visit coastlines and collect sand crabs, Emerita analoga. The students count and measure and sex the crabs to collect data, again, on abundance and distribution. In both the Sandy Beach and in the Rocky Intertidal, students spend at least 2 full class periods, as I said, training on the protocols and practicing with the equipment in the classroom, so that we're really confident that we're getting the best quality data that we can out in the field. And here's a couple examples of student opening a sand crab's telson there to check to see if that crab is male or female. And then great video here of students collecting core samples of sand and running back. These are great videos that we show as part of the training protocol as well, because the students are clearly having a fun time. It's reassuring to the chaperones that it's relatively safe, but also the students aren't all doing the protocols exactly correctly too. So these videos give us a chance to assess, for the students to assess, okay, where are they doing it right? Where are they following the protocols? Where are they needing to improve the quality of the work that they're doing? And then finally, they're collecting data the whole time. So here's a few examples of the data that they're collecting out in the field. This one on rocky intertidal habitats, where they're counting using quadrats and transects, everything from chitons and hermit crabs to surf grasses and pincushion algae. For the Emerita analoga, the sandy beach monitoring, where we collect sand crabs, they're counting the number of crabs within each sample. And the whole time we have a coordinator or a fellow or an intern following the students around and doing some QA along the way. So students, when they're entering data into the database, will not be able to see the QA score that we give them, but can then later search the database if they're trying to do a research paper and say, oh, I only want to look at data that has a QA score of like 80% or higher, which is really cool. Then they're entering this data themselves into the database and can run reports and do research projects based on that data. So here, for example, we have the average number of sand crabs per year between 2016 and 2024, and the number of sand crabs in a core, and we see a huge spike in 2017. And that might be just the start of an investigation, a curiosity that the student has. Well, what was going on in 2017? Was it an El Nino year? Were there sharp rises or falls in ocean temperature or algal blooms or things like that? And from there, they, some of them, if they choose or if they're encouraged to by a teacher, will create research projects or community action projects. So here we have students who looked at the effects of varying temperatures in the Monterey Bay region. Or here, students did some really cool work on changes to their ecosystems. So this graph shows the number of mussels in blue and pincushion algae in green and surfgrass in red along the high tide zone. Where if we see at the bottom, as the number gets from 0 to 27, that's deeper into the water. So 0 would be the highest tide, highest zonation, and 27 would be the lowest zonation. And for example, here, the green pincushion algae, which is the green lines that start at the top left, has declined between 2000 and 2004, that solid green line, and then between 2010 and 2014. And then we see that the corresponding number of mussels plummeted in the lowest intertidal. There's also some evidence, less clear, that the numbers are going up in that high and mid tide zones. So we might ask, why might that be? Well, mussels tend to live in the mid tide zone. Perhaps they're moving up as sea levels rise. Similarly, surfgrass is a very low intertidal and subtidal grass, but the red dotted line versus the solid line shows that the surfgrass has increased significantly in the lower zonations. So why that might be? That might be a question that students investigate. We might be seeing the evidence of sea level rise here, that surfgrass is moving up as water levels move up. And then they can present these papers or posters or research action, community action projects in symposiums and science fairs. The Pacific Coast Museum of Natural History hosts a symposium every year for students who participate in our field programs. And it's a real celebration of student scientists, with scientists from MBARI and from NOAA and from local universities coming to review their work, which is a really cool thing, both for students to celebrate the quality of their work and their achievements, and also something to put on their resumes or their college applications. And finally, we really want to emphasize with students that they're doing real science, from the background research to the field work, collecting and analyzing data, writing reports, doing community action projects. This is the scientific process. And a lot of the students that we serve don't have nearly as much access as they should to such experiences. And of course, that means that the people who go into science are self-selecting and represent a more narrow portion of the public. So a big part of our goal with LiMPETS is to expand who is included in the scientific process, who sees themselves as a scientist, particularly when it comes to a changing planet, because we all know that the people most impacted by climate change are the ones who've done the least to cause it. I am always emphasizing to students that don't need to be a guy with like crazy white hair in a lab coat to be a scientist, that we're all scientists, just with a much cooler scientific lab location. And I'm going to end with a video that Cassandra's going to
Today we're in
share.
Pebble Beach, California, examining the species that live in the tide pools near high tide.
Under the sea, under the sea. Darling, it's better down where it's wetter. Take it from me. Up on the shore, they work all day. Out in the sun, they slave away. While we devoting full time to floating under the sea.
Hermit crabs are native to this area and have characteristics such as red antennas and white bands on their legs. Their home in the tidal pools are in water, under the rocks, or in the sand. All of these hermit crabs use snail shells as portable home. An abiotic factor affecting hermit crabs is global temperature. Because water temperature is rising, many species, including hermit crabs, move to areas such as Monterey to find a temperature that is right for them. An adaptation of this hermit crab is that it uses its tail to clamp onto the shell and support the shell with some of its walking legs. This enables the crab to orient the shell and maintain its position. The human impact on sea life includes the carbon dioxide produced by our cars and factories. Because of our industrialized world, organisms in places like the tidal pools are being affected by the warmer waters. Intertidal animals and plants are shifting their distributions and invading the natural habitats of others. As humans, we can help decrease CO2 emissions by driving electric cars, using solar power, and using other forms of transportation.
And that concludes our time at the tide pools. And to us, the ocean is
Home.
amazing, majestic, magical, and we need to do our best to preserve it.
And with that, we will head into the Q&A. And we have already had several questions come in. Okay, our first question was for Roy, asking how can we implement the projects you discussed in Washington State, such as the phytoplankton and click a coral project?
Well, the phytoplankton monitoring network is always taking new volunteers. So you can just get to their website and ask to be part of their network, and they will send you training information on how to get involved. There is a bit of a commitment, and they are good about being transparency as to what that commitment involves. As far as the coral project, the reason I ended with that is it's not easy to get students into the Gulf, with ROVs on a research vessel. It would be great if students had more access, and I think the webinars they created are a great place to start to let students see what is happening with that research project, and then I would start with their educational resources, and then Click a Coral is open to anyone, so they can just log on and create an account and participate in that citizen science project.
Thank you very much. Our next question that we had come in, how do you make your projects compelling for teachers and educators to share with their students?
I think that's for both of us, but I'll start if that's okay. I'm biased. I think science is compelling. I mean, I'm impressed with all the work. There's a lot of people in the audience that do amazing work, and I think the interest is there. It's really, for me, it's for students. It's about access. I don't think you need to make your projects more compelling. I think that's the teacher's job. I think you just need to give them access and resources. That's my opinion.
I would echo that. I think two things keep teachers from going out into the field. One is a confidence themselves being out in the field. Plenty of teachers are really comfortable in the four walls of a classroom. And so doing our best to provide the support, provide the resources, that we're not just going to send them and 36th graders out to an intertidal habitat without any safety precautions or training. That's one of the reasons, beyond the quality of the data, the confidence for teachers is the big reason that we require teacher workshops. We have everything aligned to NGSS, which helps, but really what I find is that access and funding is the hardest thing. Plenty of teachers want to do this and just don't have the resources, the bus scholarships, that sort of thing. So an increasingly large portion of my job is working on grants only for bus scholarships. That helps tremendously. But then offering teachers to come visit has helped as well. We've had plenty of teachers who were not running a class. They had a free period, and they just came to the beach to see what it was like, to see it in action from another school. And that has also allowed some teachers to decrease that fear barrier.
All right, thank you very much. And then there is a follow-up to that question. Um, Additionally, I've noticed that community outreach is much higher in the US than in Western Europe, where I am currently based. I'm wondering what you think stateside institutions do very well when it comes to outreach. And either one of you feel free to.
I have no idea. I'm surprised to hear this. This is quite surprising to me. If Roy or anyone else has any ideas, or if you want to put it in the chat, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Well, how about a shameless plug? Professional development programs in the States, like Teacher at Sea, are a great way to engage teachers and get them inspired to do this kind of work. I know that in New York City, a lot of the projects that I worked on with my students directly were well advertised through school districts, through nonprofits, and tremendous outreach. People came to my school to talk about the project before we even were able to dive in. So I think I can't speak for other places, but there are professional development networks in the United States that do promote this work.
All right, thank you very much. Our next question is, have you engaged the parents as well as any classroom citizen science?
I will start as a classroom teacher. Often parents were able to join us as chaperones. And then during parent teacher conferences, a lot of parents wanted really reassurances that the projects the students were doing in the field were safe and how to best prepare them. So I would use that platform when I presented about my class to parents or went during parent teachers conferences to kind of highlight this work and let them know what their students are getting into.
Yeah, and in the LiMPETS side, we really have focused on the classroom. We do various informal classrooms as well, working with informal science camp schools, that sort of thing. But engaging the parents directly usually comes from the teachers that we partner with. Having said that, I have found there's plenty of data out there from Yale and George Mason on the ability for who is best as climate communicators, and that the person most likely to convince a middle-aged man of the need to act on climate change is his teenage daughter. And so one of the best things, I think, one of the best side benefits of a program like this is the ability of students to develop confidence in talking about issues in their community and in their local ecosystems. And for students to create a research project, to take it home, to present it at a science fair or a student research symposium, and for their parents to see both the quality of the work that they're doing and something that they're super passionate about. And that's created, anecdotally at least, a lot of conversations at home about students' fears of climate change and students' interest in science and that sort of thing, which I think is just fantastic.
All right, thank you very much. And so we're almost at the top of the hour, so but we only have one more question currently in the queue, so I will go ahead and ask that before we wrap things up. Are there any efforts to have fish watching, like bird watching, citizen science projects? I tried to implement this in Miami. Too many regulations with snorkeling gear.
There are on the NOAA website, there is a Sea to Sky search where you can look for opportunities to engage students in citizen science. Um, I know there are a few projects out there that help you ID fish, like Fish Story, but there are a few other on herring, um, and that's mostly online work. I'm not familiar with a fish watching in the field, but I think you should start it.
And with that, that is all of our questions. Um, thank you both very much for your presentations today and sharing your work with us. Thank you for organizing this event. Rebecca, do you have any final comments?
Absolutely. Once again, it is Citizen Science Month. We're trying to share and spotlight as many programs as possible. I mentioned in the chat earlier, we have one more webinar coming up this week, no, this month. It will be April 29th, and we'll be featuring a team from North Carolina State, including Dr. Sarah Carrier and Christine Goforth. They recently completed a study and published it talking about the impacts of citizen science in K through 5, K through 6 education. So looking at how implementing meaningful citizen science opportunities in elementary schools can increase science literacy, as well as some of the other findings from their study. And this study was really interesting because it specifically used the COCO-RAS program, which is one of our precipitation and weather programs. That's accessible to anybody, not just school kids, but it talks about the success of implementing that in K through 6 education and some of the trends that they noticed from that. I think it's going to be really interesting. I found the paper super inspiring and super helpful. So if you have time, definitely check out that one. I believe that Cassandra put the registration link in the chat. If you're not able to attend live, it will also be recorded and placed on our YouTube channel as well.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you, audience, for joining us today. We hope to see you at our next seminar. Have a great rest of the day.